Hello, welcome to the Self Learning Platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we start Unit 2, Plato, and our topic is Political Philosophy of Plato. Next topic is Community of Wives. Plato's consistency is beyond any doubt. If his theory of communalism of property is a logical corollary of his conception of justice, and his theory of communalism of families was a logical corollary of his views on communalism of property. Justice, as Plato had put it, was the very objective of the ideal state. The ideal state, Plato went on to say, consisted of the three classes, those of rulers, of the luxuries, and of the producers, each doing its own assigned jobs. Justice would be ushered in, Plato's argued, if the guardians, the rulers, and the luxuries do away with property, for property represents the element of appetite, and to do away with property demands the communalism of families. As Barker's writes for Plato, the abolition of family life among the guardians is thus inevitably a corollary of their renunciation of private property. According to Dunning, as private property and family relationships appear to be the chief sources of dissension in every community, neither is to have recognition in the perfect state. According to Sabine, some firmly was Plato convinced of the pernicious effect of wealth upon government, that he saw no way to abolish the evil except by abolishing wealth itself. The same is true also of Plato's purpose in abolishing persons as another, first being property, potent rivals to the state in competing for the loyalty of the rulers. Anxiety for one's children, Sabine concludes on behalf of Plato, is a form of self seeking more insidious than the desire for property. Plato's communalism, to put his theory very briefly, takes two forms. Sabine says the first is the prohibition of private property, whether houses, as land or money, or the rulers and luxuries, and the provision that they shall live in barracks and have their meals at the common table. The second is the abolition of a permanent monogamous sexual relation and the substitution of regulated breeding at the behest of the rulers for the purpose of securing the best possible offspring. These two types of communalism is applied on the rulers and the luxuries called the guardians by Plato. Plato's argument for communism of property and families was that the unity of the state demands their abolition. The unity of the state is to source, secure property, and family stand in the way. Therefore, property and marriage must go. To find similarities between Plato's and Marx's communalism, as Professor Jaski or Professor Maxi do, is to draw wrong parallels. Plato's communism has a political objective, an economic solution of a political element. Marx's communalism has an economic objective, a political solution of an economic element. Plato's communalism is limited to only two classes, the rulers and the luxuries, while Marx's communalism applies to the whole society. Plato's basis of communism or property is material temptation and its nature is individualistic, while Marx's basis is the growth of social evils which result from the accumulation of private property. Plato's reason for offering his scheme of community of wives and property were the following. Those who exercise political power should have no economic motives, and those who are engaged in economic activities should have no share in political power. Pragmatic as his message was, Plato had learned from the Spartan successful experiment whose citizens were denied the use of money and where they all had to consume everything in common. Plato's defense of communism of families was no less effective. Barker sums up Plato's argument in this regard. Plato's scheme has many facets and many purposes. It is a scheme of eugenics. It is a scheme for emancipation of women. It is a scheme for the nationalization of the family. It is meant to secure a better stock, greater freedom for women, and for men to develop their highest capacities, a more complete and living solidarity of the state, or at any rate of the ruler of the state. Plato's plan of communism has been denounced by many, from his disciple Aristotle down to Karl Popper. Aristotle criticizes Plato for having ignored the natural instinct of acquisition, making the scheme partial in so far as excluding the producing class from it and declaring it ascetic and aristocratic, surrendering all the best for the guardians. Others, including Karl Popper, condemn Plato's scheme of communism on numerous grounds, especially the following. It is doubtful if communism of families would bring greater degree of unity by making the guardians a single family. Communism of wives and families that Aristotle hints at was bound to create confusion if not disorder. One female would be wife of all the guardians, and one male, the husband of all the females. One may add, as Aristotle really does, a father would have 1,000 sons and a son 1,000 fathers. Common children would tend to be neglected, for everybody's child would be nobody's baby. It is also doubtful if the state controlled mating would ever be workable. It would rather reduce men and women to the levels of mere animals by suggesting temporary martial relationship. The whole scheme of communism is too rigid, too strict, and too stringent. Plato's communism of families suggests a system of marriage which is neither monogamy nor bigamy nor polygamy nor polyandry. Plato's theory of communism is too idealistic, too utopian, too imaginary, and accordingly far away from the realities of life. The next topic is ideal state, the ruling class or philosophical rulers. In all his works on political theory, there is a strong case which Plato builds in favor of an omnicompetent state. Living is one thing, but living well is another, and perhaps are different things together. It is the job of the government, Plato affirmed more than once, to help people living a complete life. The problem which Plato addressed was not how best a government could be created, but how best a government could be installed. It was thus with Plato a matter of just not a government, but a just government. Just not a government anyhow, but a perfect government. Just not a government anyway, but an ideal government, the ideal state. In the Republic, Plato constructs the ideal state in three successive stages. The healthy stage, or what Glaucon termed as the city of pigs, is more or less a social grouping where men get together on principles of division of labor and of specialization to meet their material needs. The luxurious state arising out of the men of a healthy state to quench their thirst of sofas and tables, also of saucers and sweets, and requiring thus a band of dogs keen to scent, swift of foot to pursue, and stray of limb to fight. The luxuries, the just state, the ideal one, where among the dogs the philosophers are able to judge by the rule of knowing whom to bite, that is, gentleness to friends and fierceness against enemies, are there to guide the rest. Thus, there is a clear hint of classes which constitute the ideal state: the producing class, the luxury class, and the ruling class. In the Republic, the state is led by philosophers. In the Statesman, it is a mixed state ideally led by statesmen. And in the laws, it is actual state as it is led by the laws. The ideal state of the Republic is the form of the historical and actual states. Plato's rulers, either the philosophers of the Republic or statesmen of the politics or the impersonal laws of the laws, have the responsibilities of preserving and promoting the interest of the whole community. Their aim is, as Plato expressed in the Republic, giving order and happiness to the state. our aim is founding the state. The Plato continues was the greatest happiness of the whole. We thought that in a state which is ordered with a view to the good of the whole, we should be most likely to find justice. Or again, we mean our guardians to be true saviors and not the destroyers of the state. In the politics, Plato said that governors ought to use their power with a view to the general security and improvement. In the laws, Plato was worried about the well being of the state. What he wanted was rulers, not the pretenders, rulers who must know their job and should be able to perform it in the interest of all. They should be wise, courageous, temperate, and just. The qualities as expressed in the Republic, wise and versed in the traditional customs, the unwritten laws of the divinely remote past, as in the politics, and work under the dictates of the written laws, as in the laws. The use of analogies in the writings of the ancient Greek thinkers was a usual exercise, showing, as Barker says, a characteristic of the tradition from the old philosophy of nature to the new philosophy of man. He used, his use of analogies demonstrated his love for the art of ruling, planning his ruler in the image of an artist. There are the dog soldiers for guarding and watching the human cattle and also for keeping the walls enemies at bay, the shepherd guardian for looking after the human sheep. All these are mentioned in Republic. There is the physician statesman responsible for the general health of the ailing state, the pilot statesman skilled in his art, wise in his job, and rich in his experiences for ordering the affairs of the ship of the state, the weaver's statesman for creating a just harmony uniting different elements of human nature. All these are mentioned in the politics. Knowledge is the merit which qualifies the rulers to rule their people. It helps them, Plato said, perform their responsibilities in the most perfect manner. The rulers, he insisted, ought to know the science of politics. They ought to use the science he held as the artist uses his art. What Plato urged was the very competence of the rulers and strict discipline in the performance of their functions. His rulers do the job of ruling as the peasant does the tilling. The peasant is a peasant because he knows the job of tilling, so that ruler is a ruler because he knows the job of ruling. Plato did not take any chance which could put the rulers away from their ideas. So there are the communistic devices applied on the rulers as in the republic. The, the promises from them to be alive to the divinely customs as in the politics, and the demands from them to be loyal to the written codes as in the laws. Plato wanted the art and science of politics to be directed towards the attainment of a just order in which each individual or each group of individuals does his own appointed function. This is why he makes his rulers experts in their branch of business. Thus is why he makes his rulers undergo an intensive system of education and training. This is why he makes his rulers lead a life devoid of any personal temptations. His anxiety was to build a perfect and hierarchical society where the rulers are expected to uphold and maintain ideals of justice, republic, sustenance, politics, and public goods law. Plato vested in his philosophical ruler absolute power on the premise that reason ought to be supreme. However, he did not safeguard, as rightly pointed out by Popper, against was the possible abuse and misuse of unchecked absolute powers, no matter how just or wise the ruler might be. Plato writes in the Laws, if anyone gives too great a power to anything, too large a sail to vessel, too much food to the body, too much authority to the mind, and does not observe the mean, everything is overthrown. And in the wantonness of excess runs in the one case to disorders and in the other to injustice. His rulers have power, they have power because they have responsibilities. Maintaining the rule of justice, allowing no innovation in the system of education, and watching against the entry either of poverty or of wealth into the state, and keeping the size of the state neither large nor small, but one and sufficient. Here we want to wind up this lecture. Thank you so much for your attention.